はい、岡ちゃんです。赤松ひとみさんパート2後半の部分ということでご紹介をしていきたいと思います。まずですね、この後半の一番ラストの部分ですね、この部分をちょっと切り取って、そのひとみさんの一言、さらにこのビデオのナレーション、ナレーターがですね結んでいる言葉がありますので、これをまず聞いてみていただきたいと思います。英語とそれからそれに付随する日本語をサブテキストという形で、取ってありますので、こちらをまず見てください。どうぞ。
At the end of her session, before being told what the target was, Hitomi records a final thought.
Suddenly my mind was still kept going with the target, and then my mind or the thought suddenly said they should study consciousness, they should study the power of mind, otherwise they'll never get there.
That Hitomi could be given a blind target and then so accurately describe the location, the people, and events sheds light on the remarkable potential of human consciousness. And in the end, the session describing the God particle brings us back to basic questions. What is the origin of our physical universe? How did matter come into being? And what part does consciousness play?
スイスにあるCERNという、スーパーコリドア、これを遠隔投資して得たものはですね、想像以上の、結果が出てるわけですね。びっくりするのはですね、俯瞰して物理的に物として見るだけではなくて、そこに働いている人、もしくはこのプロジェクトをリーダーをしている博士、その人たちがどのような思いでこれを成し遂げようとしているかということが遠隔投資、リモートビューイングでその人の心の中を覗き見ている。さらにびっくりすることにですね、ヒッグス粒子の中に入り込んで、それがどのようにエネルギーを作り出しているか、アクセレレーター、加速器ということで、どのような役割を果たしているか、そのようなことがリモートビューイングで見られているというのは驚きですね。こちらをちょっと見てください。どうぞ。
She saw some kind of large circular mechanical device with a sense of spinning motion. She sensed it had to do with engineering and said people were monitoring it. Later in the session, she drew it again and said of the machine, "It's dangerous, too high voltage, too energetic."
Hitomi begins by sketching the physical layout of the collider. She gets the machines, she gets the tunnels, she gets the shapes. Then she goes on to the people working there, the technicians in the hard hats, the people doing some type of intense experimentation.
Hitomi's awareness is drawn back to the technicians. She said of this person, "He is proud of his job, dedicated, serious, focused, and tense. He wears a hard helmet, has radio communications, strict instructions, rules, making sure to do it right." Then she begins to hone in on the collider itself. Her description of this image states, "Hard protective metals, energies inside, very active," and she writes, "like an accelerator."
I said it accelerator because I saw high speed of energies just going inside, and then so vibrational and so strong and powerful. and I felt like it's almost like a creation of some kind. And I saw metallic object, and I saw it is happening inside.
Inside the structure, she perceives a shaft of light. She describes energies like an explosion.
Well, I saw a cylinder-shaped object, and inside I saw such a high static vibrational energy inside, and I saw something collapsing, and I just wrote it down as a Big Bang.
Then she sees what she describes as a network of lights. It is interesting that she used colored pens to draw this image, coloring it red and blue. This is the image captured by scientists in Switzerland. It is the graphic they released showing evidence of what they believe to be the Higgs boson particle.
If you look at Hitomi's complete session for the Higgs boson, and if you just took those pages or cut and pasted different data points, you could lay out the factory line to the Higgs boson. The place, the people, the equipment, the process, and some of the kind of like spectacular aspects of the actual colliding of particles.
Hitomi continued as information flowed through her subconscious. Of these graceful lines, she says, particle movement, cosmic, natural laws. This is another image used by physicists to illustrate the action of subatomic particles in the collider.
In my opinion, the session warrants a great deal of looking at from a teacher's perspective to see the type of data, the type of mindset, and then I'd actually want to know when you got this portion. I mean, regardless of what she explained in her paper or what she had written, I'd want to query her about reliving that specific sensation and then backing that back to the skill and that she had learned from her instructors.
By this point in the session, Hitomi is in a hypnagogic state, near sleep, with theta waves dominating her brain functions. It is in this state that a remote viewer can bilocate to the target. She describes fractal-like images.
Once you get into a target at a certain level, you're not really blind anymore. You're not really blind to the nature of the target. I mean, you figure it out. So from that point on, there's a new possibility that exists in the data, and that is the viewer assembles it all, maybe with a twist that might not be correct. Maybe the viewer would fill in data with like type scientific data.
I came back to the real people and then started observing the people having a serious meeting, and I saw the scientist was talking about what he was doing, and then there are some people who are doubtful and skeptical, yet they're like, sweating and trying to understand hard. It was very serious.
She sees a man giving a presentation who she describes as the scientist, the director. Peter Higgs is the British physicist who headed the project. As the experiments in Switzerland unfolded, scientists held briefings to give updates.
A lot of the imagery and a lot of the pages didn't really make sense to me at first because I'm not a physicist. I don't really understand what goes on inside the Higgs boson particle accelerator. So we set some of the pages aside, and it wasn't until after we talked to a physicist that the physicist explained how good a lot of this stuff was.
She did a remarkable job. I give her very high marks on what she did as far as her looking at the CERN facility. She got the information on not only the facility, the people there, but she got on the function, what it does, how it does, and toward the end, even how important that whole function is and how it related to her. Very good job.
And then later we started taking her sketches and we'd find images from the Higgs boson on the internet and we'd compare them and go, wow, that's what she saw, that's what she drew exactly. We hadn't understood that until we found the imagery later. So the feedback process took many months.
The work was scientific grade data produced, kind of like off one. It's like not like a scientist would say it, but like someone who understood it would say it, but didn't know the scientific terminology or the lexicon for explaining it. There was several areas of very complex remote viewing assumptions where she had actually collected data that was specific and related, and by the time you look at the entire session, which took how long to make? 4 or 5 hours worth of work. So she hit this like an academic. She really hit it at a different level.
Now, hours into the session, she is no longer aware of her surroundings in Hawaii. The reactions in the collider become her reality.
When I saw those particles or existences, I saw they are perfectly lined up, and each particle seems to be communicating with each other, although they have a distance between them, but there is such a perfection as in distance and ratios and space and time, and perfectly harmonic, like a harmonic resonance, and I almost felt like I was listening to an orchestra of music. It was so beautiful.
Although fluent in English, she is challenged to find words and phrases to express her perceptions.
What you get is you use your intent to query the database. And when you query the database, you get information back. And I would assume that in her mind, she was asking the question like, well, how do I relate to all this? What does all this mean? What's the big picture? Really, what's going on here and why is it significant?
When I saw the energetic movement of the beings that are existing there, they are drawing like a fractal coming over and over, interacting and expanding and growing and creating. Then I hit an idea that Fibonacci, that must be it. And then I start drawing that picture more like from my thought.
Almost like a collision inside her brain, she suddenly finds herself within the reaction.
At first, when I saw the images on my blackboard, I felt they are living organisms as they have consciousness in them. Therefore, at first, I just thought that can be a neural networks in the brain. Then I looked into it and I start seeing the beautiful strings of energies that are colorful, almost like a rainbows of shaft of energies are interacting, intercommunicating with each other. And then as I observed them, they responded to me and they even know what I am looking at, and they seem to be communicating with each other at the same time. When I'm present at the target site as a remote viewer, they saw me. When I say they, those energies or consciousness existing at the target site.
So you are consciousness. You're not a body. And you as consciousness can query the databases that have to do with this virtual reality, or you can go to other reality frames, explore the larger consciousness system. It's all open to you because you're a part of that system. You're just a piece of it. And because you're consciousness, you communicate. That's what data is all about. That's information exchange. What else would a consciousness system do but information exchange? It's an information system.
I was in there like a swimming. Say you are in a swimming pool or vast ocean and you're swimming and diving, more like I was in it and communicating with them. And I know they responded to me in some way.
Your ability to remote view is not limited by what you think, but how you think. So remote viewing is a process in which you by virtue of your intent, acquire information that you normally wouldn't have any access to. It's amazing, and it makes the point that viewer development is more important than viewer training.
Close your eyes. Look on Blackboard and realizing that you're looking at the air at this target. Let it form up and tap your finger slowly and look.
When you develop the viewer themselves, and Hitomi had undergone almost constant, non-stop remote viewing exposure for about a year, because she had a student of David Morehouse, a student of ours. I mean, she had really thrown herself into it. So that target was extraordinary.
Hitomi begins by sketching the physical layout of the collider. She gets the machines, she gets the tunnels, she gets the shapes. Then she goes on to the people working there, the technicians in the hard hats, the people doing some type of intense experimentation. She describes the scientists, and she talks about the press conference that the scientists are holding afterwards. So she got all this on the physical level. And then after that, she delves into the subatomic, into the energetic level. So she goes deeper and deeper and into the more and more theoretical. And she starts describing these subatomic reactions and how they relate to nature. And then at some point, she takes it to consciousness. And her own consciousness starts interacting with the consciousness that's creating this particle. So there we get to a whole new level of remote viewing, to something that is just so remarkable. I guess it's why you would call it the God particle.
It was a beautiful experience, but also almost like you are almost like I felt I have to bow down to something greater than who I am, and I felt I was in an inspirational state, so that I felt God.
Some scientists would have us believe that consciousness sprang up somehow from inert matter. I've seen science shows and they explain it like this. You have the primordial soup where you have minerals and elements, and somehow some spark of energy is applied. Lightning strikes or the sunlight, and these inert materials somehow attain life. Single-celled, very simple organisms. And these simple organisms evolve into more complex organisms and somehow along the way achieve consciousness. Maybe that's backwards. Maybe it all begins with consciousness, and so-called matter and our reality is a construct of consciousness.
The hard problem to consciousness researchers is the problem of trying to discover how consciousness comes out of inorganic and organic matter. You know, how do you develop consciousness? Yes, a biological system could develop, structure and can develop, beings that can do things. It develops trees and it develops all sorts of structure. That's what biology does. It builds structure. But the structure doesn't equate to consciousness. Consciousness is something different. Consciousness is the only thing that is real, is the only thing that's fundamental. Our reality, our physical universe, is a virtual reality. And when you have a virtual reality, somebody has to compute it. Well, a virtual reality is just a reality based on information. It's an informational-based reality. And the larger consciousness system is the creator of this virtual reality that we call our physical reality.
I believe that consciousness is a dimension, and not just, when you have to use it to define itself, it should give you some hint or clue. You can't even imagine a dimension without consciousness, so how could consciousness not be a dimension itself?
At the end of her session, before being told what the target was, Hitomi records a final thought.
Suddenly my mind was still kept going with the target, and then my mind or the thought suddenly said they should study consciousness, they should study the power of mind, otherwise they'll never get there.
That Hitomi could be given a blind target and then so accurately describe the location, the people, and events sheds light on the remarkable potential of human consciousness. And in the end, the session describing the God particle brings us back to basic questions. What is the origin of our physical universe? How did matter come into being? And what part does consciousness play?
ひとみさんのですね、最後の一言、ビデオの最後の一言ということで、コンシャスネスというものをより深く理解して勉強する必要があるねと。もう一つですね、パワーオブマインド、をスタディする必要があるよということを言ってます。さらに結びの言葉としてですね、この宇宙の成り立ち 意識とどのように関連があるんだろうか、我々の生物はどのようにして、出来上がってきてるんだろうか、もしかしたら意識というものがかなり関与してるんではないかというお話で締めくくっております。今日はたまたまですね、赤松ひとみさんのリモートビューイングから見えた、物理学の最先端の知識、量子物理学、それと我々の人間の意識、このつながりをかなりですね、深く読み取った結果がこのビデオとして表現されていると思います。非常に貴重なビデオだと、思います。それにしてもですね、赤松ひとみさんがブラジルで殺害されたというニュースなんですが、ショッキングなことなんですが、彼女の冥福を祈ると同時にですね、彼女の意志をつないで、この意識の世界というものを深く探求していく必要があるんではないかと思っております。今回も、長い一部二部にわたって、見ていただいたと思います。ありがとうございます。またこのようなですね、不思議な世界、皆さんにお伝えしていきたいと思います。ありがとうございました。